At 35,000 feet, the calm Caribbean sky was shattered by the sudden wail of sirens. On a Venezuelan runway, a Su-30 Mk two-flanker rolled forward. The pilot received a clear order: intercept and deter. Inside the cockpit, the radar showed a single bright contact, a B-52H Stratofortress. The Venezuelan pilot seemed completely sure of himself. He pushed into boost mode and closed the distance, not to escort, but to send a message. Then he made a classic aggressive pass, slicing across the bomber's nose at nearly 500 knots. The blast from his jet wash slammed into the B-52's fuselage and shook the giant aircraft hard. But the American crew stayed composed. They did not turn. They did not climb. They did not break formation. They simply kept flying straight ahead. That calm reaction only seemed to frustrate the Venezuelan pilot more. He moved the main control stick to arm the weapon system. His crosshair settled on the center of the B-52's fuselage, and the Su-30's N001 VEP radar began to track. A warning tone filled the cockpit, confirming the lock. The countdown started. 15 seconds to launch. In that instant, the encounter crossed a line in international airspace. His finger moved toward the trigger, and then everything went dark. The systems failed without warning. The Su-30's advanced radar suddenly filled with around 50 ghost targets, then flashed white, then went completely black. In a moment, he had lost the picture. What he did not realize was that for the previous 40 minutes, he had been flying into a technical exclusion zone created by the U.S. Navy. All he saw was a B-52. What he could not see was the vast amount of advanced stealth and electronic warfare technology surrounding the area, silently tracking every move. This is how the United States took control of the encounter without firing a single shot. But the story did not begin when the Su-30 appeared on the horizon. It began hours earlier, inside a briefing room. The mission for the B-52H Stratofortress was straightforward: conduct a freedom of navigation and overflight operation. Its route had been carefully planned to remain just outside the 12 nautical mile limit of Venezuela's claimed territorial waters. This was not designed as an attack. It was a message written across the sky at 35,000 feet. International airspace belongs to everyone. The U.S. military understood that this flight would trigger a response. In fact, that response was expected. On the Venezuelan pilot's radar, the situation looked simple: one huge target, alone in the sky. But that picture was an illusion, shaped by a deeply layered combat network refined through decades of modern warfare. The first layer of that network was the quarterback in the sky, an E-3 Sentry AWACS orbiting safely about 200 miles away. This was far more than an aircraft with a powerful radar. It was an airborne command center, the direct successor to the systems that changed air combat forever. During Operation Desert Storm, the E-3 turned a crowded, chaotic sky into a tightly controlled battle space. It helped coordinate more than 30,000 offensive sorties and played a major role in the collapse of the Iraqi Air Force, all while preventing friendly air-to-air losses. That proven legacy is exactly what matters here. The second the Su-30 lifted off the runway, it appeared on an E-3 operator screen as Bandit 1. Its speed, altitude, and heading were no longer known only to its pilot. They had instantly become part of a larger American tactical picture. And that information did not stay on the AWACS. It was immediately pushed into the digital backbone of the entire force through Link 16, a secure, jam-resistant tactical network developed during the Cold War and strengthened through decades of NATO operations. Through Link 16, the pilot in an F-22, the commander aboard a nearby Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and the officers monitoring the mission from a command center in Florida could all see the same real-time picture of the battle space. There was no confusion, no delay, no guessing, only shared awareness at every level. That leads to the most dangerous part of the B-52's real escort. Two F-22 Raptors flying under strict emission control. Their APG-77 radars remained silent, dark, undetectable. They did not need to broadcast their presence because the AWACS had already delivered the Su-30's position directly to their cockpit displays. They were not out there searching. They were already in position to track a target that had effectively been found for them. At this stage, their most important sensor was the ALR-94 electronic warfare suite. It was far more than a warning receiver. It functioned like a highly specialized system built to read, sort, and interpret the enemy's electronic signature in extraordinary detail. And this capability was not theoretical. Over Syria, F-22s operated freely in airspace, watched by some of the most advanced Russian-built defense systems in the world. They did more than avoid S-300 and S-400 radar coverage. They quietly studied those systems, mapping their positions and analyzing how they worked, building a detailed electronic picture while remaining unnoticed. So as the Venezuelan pilot prepared for his attack run, he was acting on a deadly misunderstanding. He believed he was the one in control, closing in on a lone heavy bomber with nowhere to hide. In truth, he was the only pilot in the encounter who could not see the full picture. He was flying straight into a carefully built digital trap. The B-52 was the anvil, steady, exposed, and unshaken. The AWACS was the eye above, tracking everything and guiding the response. And the F-22s were the unseen force in the background, holding position in silence, ready the moment the situation changed. The Venezuelan pilot made that moment come himself. As soon as his thumb moved the target designation controller, the Su-30's avionics reacted. The N001 VEP radar, which had been sweeping a wide 120-degree area in front of the aircraft, narrowed its energy into a tight beam only about 2.5 degrees wide. This was single-target lock mode, precise, effective, and impossible to hide electronically. At that point, he was no longer just tracking the B-52. He was broadcasting his intent in the clearest way possible, flooding the area with a concentrated stream of X-band radar energy. That single move came at a heavy cost. To gain a perfect firing solution, he gave up nearly all situational awareness. By narrowing his focus, he had effectively blinded himself, and in doing so, triggered the trap. The concentrated radar beam became a bright signal in the electromagnetic spectrum. It was immediately detected by the electronic warfare systems of a nearby EA-18G Growler. The Growler's ALQ-218 tactical receiver, designed to detect and classify signals across a wide range of frequencies, instantly recognized the Su-30's emissions. It did not just register activity, and it identified a distinct electronic signature. In the rear cockpit, the electronic warfare officer saw the classification appear on the display: Flanker Track Mode. The opposing aircraft had just revealed both its identity and its intentions. The first response was collection. The officer activated the ALQ-99 jamming pods mounted beneath the Growler's wings. Inside those pods, the DRFM system, digital radio frequency memory, did more than interfere with the signal. It sampled and digitized it in fractions of a second, creating an almost perfect copy. This was more than interception. It was electronic intelligence happening at extreme speed, capturing the opponent's digital fingerprint in real time. That copied signal was not stored for later study. It became the next weapon. The process shifted instantly from listening to deception. A preloaded jamming program was launched. The DRFM processor began altering the cloned signal, generating around 50 false targets. This was not random interference. Each false contact was carefully crafted to look authentic, complete with simulated velocity changes through Doppler effects and adjusted echo strength to suggest different ranges. The Su-30 was now receiving a flood of fake tactical information, each return appearing just as believable as the real target. Then came the final step. Not elegance, not subtlety, raw electronic dominance. The officer ordered the ALQ-99 pods fully active. Their transmitters sent the false signals back toward the Su-30 with far greater strength than the fighter's own radar output. The Su-30 had transmitted with limited power. The Growler answered with overwhelming force. What followed inside the Su-30's radar processor was immediate and severe. A system built to track only a handful of targets at once was suddenly forced to interpret around 50 powerful, high-priority returns. Its processing load surged beyond intended limits. In electronic terms, it resembled a large-scale denial-of-service attack, not against a website, but against a combat system. Unable to sort the impossible stream of conflicting data, the software triggered an internal protection routine. The system had two options: continue operating under overload or shut itself down. It chose self-preservation. Power to the radar array was cut. Inside the cockpit, the Venezuelan pilot was left in sudden electronic darkness. The sharp tone of the lock-on warning suddenly vanished. On the radar display, the vivid tactical picture that had filled the screen just moments before collapsed into darkness. What remained was a blank, lifeless surface, reflecting only the pilot's own disbelief. He had entered the situation relying on a digital advantage. Instead, an unseen opponent had reached into that system and torn it apart in seconds. Inside the Su-30 cockpit, the silence was more unsettling than any alarm. Only moments earlier, the pilot had believed he held control of the sky, the dominant force in the engagement. Now he sat inside an expensive aircraft with its sensing systems effectively neutralized, reduced to little more than a powerless airframe. He had not been physically struck. He had been electronically stripped of capability, and it had been done by an adversary he never visually confirmed, using a method he never saw coming. Without waiting for command input, instinct took over. The pilot initiated a defensive maneuver, a split ass, rolling the aircraft inverted and pulling into a steep descent with full power, accelerating away from the engagement area and back toward Venezuelan airspace. The encounter ended not with an explosion, but with separation. In the B-52's mission log, the entry was short and clinical. interceptor disengaged, mission continues. No drama, no elaboration. For the American crew, this was not chaos or crisis. It was routine. A controlled, expected outcome inside a system designed for this exact kind of situation. Their calm was not overconfidence, it was familiarity with the architecture supporting them. Still, one question remains in any escalation scenario. What if the Venezuelan pilot, in a moment of escalation or misjudgment, had attempted to launch anyway? If a short-range R-73 infrared missile had been fired, the response layer above would already have been in motion. The two F-22s, operating quietly from a position outside the pilot's awareness, would shift from passive tracking to engagement preparation. Before the Su-30 pilot could complete a visual lock, long-range AIM-12 OD missiles would already be in the air. They would not require continuous radar illumination from the launching aircraft. Mid-course updates would be provided through the data network, guiding them toward the target area using inertial navigation, with onboard seekers activating only in the final moments. There would be no audible warning for the Su-30 pilot, no chance to react in time. From his perspective, the aircraft would simply be gone. It would not be a duel of visible pilots or exchange fire at close range. It would be a layered, networked engagement where one side sees everything, and the other sees almost nothing. And if ground forces attempted to escalate further by activating systems such as S-300VM batteries in response, it would mark the beginning of a far broader response cycle, one the Pentagon categorizes as Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses, SEAD, designed specifically to dismantle integrated missile coverage before it can effectively operate. At that exact moment, the E-3 AWACS detects a second problem developing in the battle space. A Su-35 flanker has shifted its nose toward the F-22 formation and activated its electronic jamming suite. The situation changes instantly from a single engagement into a multi-domain coordination problem. Now there is a dilemma. Limited bandwidth, multiple high-priority threats. On one side, there is a suspected submarine contact that may be moving into a potential launch posture. That information needs to be pushed to a P-8 maritime patrol aircraft to maintain underwater tracking continuity. On the other side, the F-22s are now operating under active electronic attack from the Su-35's jamming. If that pressure is not countered or mitigated, the air picture becomes degraded, and the F-22s may lose their ability to maintain tactical advantage at long range. Two critical requirements. One, constrained network. Do you prioritize maritime tracking continuity or air dominance support? If attention shifts too heavily toward the submarine, the air engagement risk increases. If focus shifts entirely to countering jamming in the air domain, the undersea track may degrade at the worst possible moment. This is where modern warfare stops being about platforms and becomes about prioritization logic. The AWACS crew does not think in terms of either slash or as a simple choice. They think in layers of risk, time sensitivity, and consequences. The submarine threat is low visibility but potentially strategic. The air threat is immediate and dynamic, directly affecting survivability in real time. That difference matters. Data fusion systems begin automatically sorting inputs by urgency, decay rate, and mission impact. Some information can tolerate delay, some cannot. At the same time, the F-22s are not blind. Even under jamming, they are not relying solely on their own radar emissions. They are still receiving off-board targeting updates through distributed data links, allowing them to maintain situational awareness even in a degraded environment. This is the key point most people miss. The network is not a single pipe that must be split evenly. It is a layered system with redundancy, prioritization rules, and adaptive routing. If the air threat becomes unstable, the system can allocate more support to maintaining fighter coherence. If the submarine contact becomes time-critical, maritime assets can be tasked independently to continue the track without constant high-bandwidth updates. In other words, it is not about dividing attention equally. It is about allowing different parts of the force to operate semi-independently while still contributing to a shared picture. The Su-35's jamming does not erase the F-22s from the battle space. It raises the cost of tracking and forces reliance on alternative sensors and off-board data. Meanwhile, the P-8 does not require constant streaming updates to remain relevant to the mission. It operates on a slower, more persistent tracking cycle. So the real decision is not a dramatic binary choice between two catastrophes. It is a timing problem. What must be acted on in seconds, and what can safely be managed in minutes? That is the core logic behind modern kill chain management. Not reacting to everything at once, but sequencing responses so that no single threat collapses the system. And in that environment, victory is not about who has the most information. It is about who can prioritize correctly under pressure without breaking the network that everything depends on. The moment the S-300 search radars came online, they would no longer function as passive defenders. In that instant, they would become visible emitters, identifiable points in the electromagnetic spectrum. And in modern warfare, anything that transmits can be located. Anti-radiation weapons like AGM-88 missiles, deployed from platforms such as EA-18G Growlers and F-16S, are specifically designed to detect and home in on those emissions. Once a radar begins broadcasting, it effectively reveals its own position. At the same time, sea-launched cruise missiles from Arleigh Burke-class destroyers positioned offshore could be assigned to strike fixed infrastructure targets, launch sites, command nodes, and supporting facilities, traveling low over the ocean on pre-programmed routes. The result is not a cinematic battle, but a tightly coordinated sequence of suppression actions executed across air, sea, and electronic domains. In practical terms, it is closer to a rapid, synchronized system strike than anything resembling a traditional dogfight. And this is the central lesson of the scenario. Modern air warfare is not decided by maneuvering skill alone. It is dominated by awareness, who can see, interpret, and act on information first. From the outside, the Venezuelan pilot sees a single aircraft. From the network perspective of a modern force, that aircraft is only one element in a far larger system. Satellites overhead, airborne early warning aircraft, electronic warfare platforms, naval assets at sea, and distributed sensors all contributing to a shared picture. One side is operating from inside a cockpit view. The other is operating from a fused multi-domain network. That difference defines the entire engagement. It is not about individual performance in isolation, it is about integration. How quickly data moves, how efficiently it is interpreted, and how effectively it is turned into coordinated action. In that structure, a fighter jet is not an independent actor. It is a node inside a broader system designed to detect, decide, and respond faster than an opponent can react. So the real contrast is not simply between aircraft types or pilot skill. It is between two ways of understanding war. One is centered on the individual, visibility, instinct, and direct confrontation. The other is centered on the system, distributed sensing, shared awareness, and coordinated response across domains. And in that environment, advantage belongs not to the platform with the best performance on paper, but to the network that turns information into action most efficiently. The rest is just the outcome of timing. Modern air combat is already heavily shaped by electronic warfare, but it is not the replacement of everything else. It's more accurate to say it has become the environment everything else operates inside. Electronic warfare, sensors, data links, and algorithms increasingly decide who sees first, who tracks first, and who can act first. In many situations, that advantage is decisive long before any traditional visual maneuvering ever begins. If one side is effectively blinded or saturated electronically, even the most skilled pilot has very little room to change the outcome. That said, traditional piloting skills have not disappeared. They've changed role. When systems are degraded, jammed, or denied, a pilot's ability to handle the aircraft manually, manage energy, stay aware of the physical environment, and recover from unexpected conditions still matters. Flight discipline, situational judgment, and training are still critical, especially in edge cases where automation and networks are disrupted. But in high-end scenarios, the first contest is usually not about turning ability in the sky. It's about information. Who can maintain a usable picture of the battle space, and who loses it first? So it's not really a choice between electronic warfare and piloting skill. It's a layered reality. Electronic warfare shapes what is visible or hidden. Networks decide how fast information moves. Sensors define what can be trusted. Pilots execute decisions under those constraints. Regarding legacy aircraft like the B-52, its continued use is less about nostalgia and more about utility. Platforms with long service lives persist because they can be upgraded into modern networks, carry large payloads, and operate as part of distributed strike systems. The airframe is old, but the role it plays is continuously redefined. In that sense, modern warfare is not replacing old with new in a clean break. It's integrating older platforms into newer systems where survivability depends less on stealth alone and more on how well an asset is supported by the network around it. So yes, electronic warfare is central to the future, but it does not eliminate traditional flying skill. It reshapes where that skill matters and under what conditions it becomes decisive.